For the first time in history, instead of talking about a grand story that accumulates into some kind of glorious victory for humanity as seen in other Minecraft simulation videos, I will tell you a story about absolute failure. This is a story about how 100 players failed to create civilization on the moon. With the ship crashing into the moon with a big, the survivors of the ship managed to escape the rubble and scatter about. However, the survivors could not go too far from the ship at the moment, as unfortunately, only the ship contained the necessary oxygen generators to survive. Despite that, many would run off into the distance, despite the fact that it was stated many times in the logs and in the debriefs that the moon has no oxygen on it. And honestly, you should know that by default if you graduate elementary school, but what do I know? I'm just a stupid panda that likes falafels. Anyways, many would suffocate out on the moon's surface. Thus, half of the population would essentially get Thanos snap. With less than 50 people remaining, a good amount of the people would finally begin to start working together. The remaining people who were left alive would end up going off and breaking off into 4 main groups. The first group was called the Cheesers because they centered their religion on the accumulation of the valuable moon cheese. The second group was called the Crater People because they lived in Zimbabwe. The third group was called the Moon Cartel because they wanted to monopolize the sweet taste of the purple Gupta juice, infamously known as lean. The last group were the people who decided to stay on the ship, also known as the Squatters. However, it should always be noted that there were other smaller groups and even a couple of solo people that were wandering about. But you, dear viewer, may be wondering, hey, if only the ship had oxygen on it, how would any groups of people spread out to try to establish civilization on the moon? Well, dear viewer, that's where the Central Universal Mindman Committee comes in. Obviously, there aren't any trees or any valuable resources on the moon besides iron and other minerals in the ground. Therefore, the Central Universal Mindman Committee throughout the days would dispatch care packages with valuable resources such as saplings, seeds, and dirt to cultivate the lands, and also tools, weapons, and armor because the moon has quite a few hostile inhabitants. However, the most important thing about these care packages was the necessary materials and instructions needed to create portable oxygen generators. With these portable oxygen generators, also known as P.O.Gs, people would go further away from the ship. These generators had about a 50-block radius in a sphere and were fueled by nether stars inside, while also using the H2O provided from the water buckets to generate just enough air for the people inside to survive. As a result of all of this, you could see the seeds of civilization beginning to grow. Just kidding, everyone would die. Okay, it wasn't that simple, but unfortunately many of the civilizations wouldn't make it to the next level in the tech tree: spacesuits. The big issue with the P.O.Gs is that once placed down, the only way to pick it back up and get the generator back was with Silk Touch. And even when a person were to pick up that generator, all the oxygen in the area would quickly begin to disappear. However, to create the spacesuits, you needed quite a bit of materials, and on top of that, many of the civilizations actually didn't know how to make the spacesuits, but only parts of it. Yet, to make matters worse, a good number of these care packages and even moderately sized cargo ships began to crash further and further away from the survivors. Therefore, it became increasingly harder to get these supplies, and it probably also didn't help that more and more meteors were also raining down on the people.
Yeah, he's actually a scrub. Just yeah.
So, what could the survivors do? Well, if they knew how to read, they would soon realize a cool trick when it came to the P.O.Gs. You can dispense some of the generated oxygen into glass bottles, thus creating something called gaseous bottles of oxygen that could be thrown on the ground to give a temporary source of oxygen as you journey outside of the generator's oxygen range. Unfortunately, many of the survivors that were left had a reading comprehension score equivalent to that of a middle schooler learning English by watching XQC play Minecraft.
We have problem I'm gonna.
Or maybe the developer just isn't that good at writing descriptions. Let me know what you think. Despite all of this, two of the groups, the Cheezers and the Crater People, had just enough IQ left to read about the whole putting oxygen into bottles so that they could travel farther on the moon. Therefore, the Crater People and the Cheezers would fill chokers with bottles of oxygen and use them when necessary to avoid suffocating in the vacuum of space. When it came to the Crater People, they got pretty lucky, as one of the cargo ships that was meant to land safely around where the original ship crashed ended up crashing relatively close to them. However, the journey was still far enough for the two members of the group,
Zacatang
and Anime, to fill a choker full of bottles of gaseous oxygen to try and recover the valuable materials from the wreck. Unfortunately for them, this would be the last time they were seen. We couldn't even find their bodies. With supplies dwindling and no leadership remaining, the members of the group would either die or wander off into the distance, never to be seen again. Unfortunately, many would follow a similar fate. For example, the Moon Cartel never accomplished their dreams to harvest and create the legendary purple drink. Instead, they sort of disappeared, leaving behind many things. It is truly unknown what had happened to them. Therefore, the only real group that managed to stay together for the time being was the Cheezers. There were, of course, many factors to this. For example, they had a strong sense of teamwork, as seen when they built this roof covering to protect themselves from meteors falling from the sky. Because, you know, meteors be dangerous.
Yeah.
On top of having exceptional teamwork, solid leadership, and of course, the fantastic solid level of 100 IQ, they were able to figure out how to make the full set of the spacesuit. Some of the features of this spacesuit was that it had more protective attributes than that of iron armor, allowed the wearer to have normal gravity, and of course, allowed them to breathe no matter where they went on the moon. The first person that got this full suit was Geeked, where he was able to go to a reported wreckage of another cargo ship that was struck down by a meteor. However, when he got there, it wasn't so great.
It's fucking huge!
After acquiring as much as he could, he and the rest of the gang were later able to cobble together all the resources to create spacesuits for everyone in the Cheezers. Therefore, with the gang fully suited up, they decided to set off and see if anyone else was still alive. Unsurprisingly, many were dead, or at least there was no evidence of people left, as seen with the Moon Cartel. Thus, the Cheezers decided that with the loss of pretty much everyone besides a handful of people, it was probably best that all of this would end the same way this all started, with a bunch of people dying. The bloodlust that occurred was so intense that even Geeked decided to turn on the rest of the Cheezers. But of course, with being heavily outnumbered, things didn't go quite well for him. Therefore, with everyone dead besides the remaining members of the Cheezers, the group decided that it was time for the true end, the finale, the time for ascension. Therefore, in their final moments, the Cheezers were able to acquire the legendary lean and upon consumption ascended to the stars in a bliss of heavenly high. Thus, marking the end of this tragic story, a story that ultimately ended with everyone dying. Ugh. Christ almighty, this video and event was quite the doozy. I am still pretty sure that this is the first time a video straight up admits that the event didn't quite go to plan. Despite this, it was still a fun experiment to see people try to establish civilization on the moon. I guess this video just shows what would happen in a scenario like this. However, if you made it this far, you're probably still wondering what in the world just happened. There has to be more to this. Therefore, if you want to know more about what actually happened and all the background information and more, check out the director's commentary in the description below. Fun fact, many of my other Civilization videos, I believe all of them actually, also have a director's commentary as well in the description. But as always, thanks for watching. Please leave a like or even a dislike if you dislike the video. I also read all the comments, or at least most of them. So share any and all of your feedback and thoughts. I look forward to reading them. If you're new, I hope you join the Discord to participate in events like these. or at least drop by and say hello. Also, feel free to check out my Patreon to get exclusive perks, like telling me what events to do and what kind of fast food I should shove into my hole.